Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We learn in Mishna Kesubos, Perek Dalet, Chapter 4, Mishnah Mishnah 5. La'olam hi b'reshus ha'av. She, meaning the girl who is either a minor or a nara, between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. She is always b'reshus ha'av. She's always in the domain of her father. Ad shetikones l'reshus habal lanisuin. Until she enters the domain of the husband for nisuin. So as we mentioned, you have Erisin, you have the first part of marriage, which is Erisin. Kedushin is also called. And then after that, you have the Nisuin, which is when she goes to the chuppah. And when the Mishnah here says, so we've been saying that, a young girl's in her father's domain. We learned yesterday's Mishnah, the different rights that the father has over the girl. And we also mentioned that when she gets married, all those rights going to go over to the husband. Now, as long as she is still an arusa, she is still in the domain of her father. However, once she enters the domain of her husband for nisuin, once she enters his domain for the completion of the marriage, which is through chuppah, and chuppah means the groom's house or private chamber that the bride enters for the sake of effecting nisuin, until that, once she hits that point of time, once she goes to chuppah, then the halacha is she is no more in the domain of the father, she is in domain of her husband. Now, what this means in a practical sense is, number one, just generally, once she goes to the chuppah, all the rights the father have now are taken over by the husband. Plus, as we learned yesterday. Another thing is like this, and I'll read to you from the bottom, which comes from the Rav, the Bartanura. We shall learn that a bride is given 12 months after Erisin to prepare for her nisuin. That's how it used to be done. There was Erisin, and she had 12 months to get ready for the nisuin, for the chuppah. Once the 12 months have passed, the groom is obligated to marry her. And even if he does not do so, he must pay for her support. He has to support her, even though she's by her father. Nevertheless, she remains forbidden to eat truma until she enters the chuppah. Let's say she's a muresa. Let's say she's married. She's mukadeshes to a kohen. She's muresas to a kohen, and she's waiting to go to the chuppah with this kohen. Now, when she's married to the kohen, she's going to be able to eat truma, the separation of grain that goes to the kohen truma. She's going to be able to eat it because the wife of a kohen is allowed to eat truma. But the point is that when just because she's an arusa, doesn't make her the wife of the kohen to be able to eat truma, and until she actually goes to the chuppah, until she actually enters the domain of the husband, even if we're at a point that the husband, the kohen husband, called him future complete husband, is a kohen, he cannot give her truma even at the point of time that he's supporting her, because it's already 12 months after the erisin. They're supposed to be married. He hasn't done it. He has to support her. Nonetheless, she's not in his domain to allow her to eat truma. So even though he is supporting her, truma he cannot give her. So that's the point, that she is in the domain of the father until she enters the domain of the husband for nisuin, for chuppah. But now the Mishnah is going to tell us that you don't have to only have chuppah to be considered as if she has entered the domain of the husband. So here we go. Masar ha'av l'shluchei habal. The father handed her over to the messengers of the husband, meaning it's time for nisuin. So what happens? The husband sends messengers to bring her to his home, to his chuppah, and the father basically hands her over to them. He hands her over to them. So we say, Masar l'shluchei habal. If the father handed her over to the messengers of the husband, which is to take her to him for nisuin, at that point, even though she hasn't actually entered the chuppah, she is now in the domain of the husband. Because by the father handing her over to the husband's messengers, the husband's agents to bring her, that is already considered she has entered the domain of the husband, and now she's in his domain, and the rights now go away from the father, and now the husband takes them over. Now, however, halacha avim shluchei habal. let's say he didn't just hand her over to the messengers and said, goodbye. He went along. The messengers of the husband came to get her, and the father went with those messengers. The father went with the messengers of the husband. Or let's say the father himself couldn't go, but he sent his own messengers to escort his daughter together with the messengers of the husband. So basically, in both these cases, he hasn't handed over her completely. There may be here the messengers of the husband that are here to bring her, but he hasn't left her. He's either there, his messengers, his agents are there escorting her. So as long as he has not given her over completely to the messengers of the husband, he or his messengers are still with them. She still remains, she still remains in the domain of the father. Now, Masru shluchei ha'av l'shluchei habal. Just going to read the words right now. The messengers of the father handed her over to the messengers of the husband. Harehi b'shus habal. She now becomes in the domain of the husband. Now what that means is like this. The father had sent these messengers to take his daughter to her oris, to the man who's going to be marrying her, who's going to be completing the marriage on her. They are already married because the kedushin was made, but now the completion of the marriage is through the chuppah. So now the father sent messengers to take his daughter over to her future husband. Okay, and as they were traveling to go to the husband, who do they meet? The messengers of the husband. He had sent out people to get her. So now the original messengers of the father were told, give her over to the husband. And what's happening now is that they landed up meeting up with the messengers of the husband, and they gave her over to the messengers of the husband. Basically, they didn't deliver her to the husband himself, which is what the father originally said for them to do. He handed her over to the messengers of the husband. Nonetheless, even though they haven't done exactly what the father had told them to do, harehi b'shus habal. Now that she's being given over to the messengers of the husband, and the messengers of the father will not be escorting her anymore, she is now considered in the domain of the husband. And even though the husband's not in here yet, nonetheless, the rights over her that the father had now go over to the husband, plus the other advantage that he has that we learned the husband has over a father, as we learned in yesterday's Mishnah. Right. Okay, so we said that an example where you see that someone wants to go into a partnership with someone, and you know it's not going to work out well with this partner, you are allowed to tell this person that this person may he's not going to be a good partner. He's going to mess you up, even though that's technically rechilas. But being that you're doing it to protect the person, it's not forbidden. But he said there are a number of conditions that have to be met. The Elohein, these are they, says the Chofetz Chaim. You should not be too quick to decide things are not going to be good. You got to figure out, you got to think through well, is what you are concerned about, is that really going to be a problem or not? So don't jump and say, oh, don't go into a partnership with this guy because this guy's going to mess you up because he, does things in this way. Before you decide that that's a problem, think it over well before you say something. That's number one. Don't exaggerate it. Don't make it bigger than it is. It is what it is. Say it over as is, and that person will deal with it. But don't make it bigger than it is. You're not allowed to exaggerate it. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll continue Mitzvah Shem next week with this. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi. Or as they say, if I told you once, I've told